Morning, everyone. We'll just give it a couple minutes to let some more people in and then we'll get started.
Great stuff.
Oh, I think we'll start there. So good morning, everyone. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name's Kat and I'll be managing the webinar behind the scenes. Just let you know, all your cameras have been turned off and microphones are muted. If you do have any questions during the session, please use the Q&A button at the top of your screen. Juliet and Sam will go through all questions towards the end and answer as many as possible. And just to reassure you, today's session is being recorded, so there's no need to worry about taking notes. The recording will be sent out to you after the webinar. I'll now hand over to Juliet to get us started.
Great. Thank you very much, Kat. Good morning, everyone. Hope you can all hear me okay. And thanks so much for coming to join us this morning on what looks to be a very packed webinar. No more easy dismissals. What you don't know could cost you. So we've got a lot of content. Let's crack on. Well, I think we can probably all agree that no dismissal really is ever easy. But traditionally, probationary dismissals have carried a lower risk. And let's look today at why that may not be the case any longer. My name, for those of you that don't know me, is Juliet Price. I'm the founder and managing director of Park City. And for more than 30 years, we've helped organisations stay compliant, manage their risk, and build confident and capable leadership teams. Now, before we dive in to the detailed content, I'd like to pose a couple of questions to you all. Have a think about how prepared do you feel to handle the most significant employment law changes in decades? Are you confident that your business is aware of all the changes and you've got actions to close any gaps? Are your managers briefed on what to do and are they ready? Are your policies up to date and compliant? Well, today we're going to help you, hopefully, build that compliance and that clarity and some confidence. So let's run through on the next slide what we're going to cover today. So no more easy dismissals, is that right? Well, why is that? We're going to look at that. The Employment Rights Act 2025 will do a bit of a recap on what's already live. Then we'll look at what's still to come. The clear steps for effective management of probation and what's changing there and what you need to be aware of. And we'll also cover some top tips for managing performance. We're definitely going to look at the pitfalls because there are lots of them. And what we can learn from some tribunal cases. So we'll look at some live cases that have gone through and how the tribunal have judged them. We'll also look at how you can benefit from Park City's updates, those that are free, as well as obviously chargeable services that will help your business. So what sets this Employment Rights Act really apart from other reform cycles? Well, it's not only the kind of sheer scale, some 173 reforms, but also the really clear intent behind it and the increased financial risk now for employers. The system here is deliberately being redesigned to remove the buffers that previously protected employers. The 2-year qualifying periods for unfair dismissal are being shortened. And that's what we mean by no more easy dismissals, easy as in low risk or no risk. Tribunal deadlines are being extended, compensation caps are being removed, And enforcement of employment law is being centralised and strengthened in the form of the Fair Work Agency. And if you've not heard of the Fair Work Agency, many employers and businesses are blissfully unaware. We'll come on to a bit about that later. So all of this means that the risk has shifted away from only sort of the bad employers squarely onto the unprepared ones. And employers will no longer be judged on whether they meant to do the right thing. They'll be judged on whether they can evidence that they actually did. So today is a business risk briefing, really. And we don't want you or your managers to get caught out. So that's our main mission in life. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. We thought we'd bring this earlier in the presentation, so do scan the QR code because there are lots of free resources that you can benefit from in your business. If you sign up to our VIP webinar list, it's an exclusive list, especially for those that join our webinars, and you will get some great guidance, some resources, some downloads, practical top tips and things. So do scan that QR code and sign up. The QR code will be, again, if you've missed it, on the slides at the end. Okay, so let's move on then to the Employment Rights Act. What is already live? What's already come in? Well, some changes are already in. Okay, we covered them in previous webinars. So those of you that follow all of our webinars, I'm going to do a bit of a recap. For those of you that haven't seen previous webinars, you can sign up to gain recordings. Okay. But let's do a recap because it's important we do. So from April, what came in this year, statutory sick pay reforms, SSP, now starts from day one and is available to all employees, not just those earning over the lower earnings limit. Day one, paternity leave and unpaid parental leave. Eligible employees can now give notice of leave from their first day of employment. Collective redundancy, the penalties, the maximum protective award for failing to collectively consult has doubled. Bereaved partners' paternity leave. This is a new right to time off following the death of a child's mother, or the primary adopter. And the Fair Work Agency, launched in April 2026. This is a new enforcement body for key employment rights. And of course, you're now under the key duty, a new key duty to keep full holiday records, showing that you've complied with the holiday entitlement and pay rules. And the key points are that records must be kept for 6 years, even after the employee has left the business. The Fair Work Agency has the power to inspect those records, and failing to keep adequate records is a criminal offence, punishable by a fine. So it's really important that your record-keeping systems accurately capture who's entitled to what, who received what, both in terms of leave and pay entitlements. So what's going to really help you here is a central digital HR system. This is ideal because it makes it straightforward to produce records and reports quickly if the Fair Work Agency comes calling. Whatever system that you use, train the managers to use it correctly and consistently. Park City have a really low-cost HR system ready to go for you, so get in touch with us and we can help set that up for you. Okay, unless you're a very large business, it's pretty doubtful that the Fair Work Agency is randomly going to come knocking at your door. But if employees think that you've got your sums wrong, then it might contact the Fair Work Agency and then they might investigate. So that's the key thing to be aware of. And all employees can still, of course, bring a claim for unlawful deduction of wages if they think you've underpaid them in terms of holiday pay and things, any other statutory element. So a good record keeping system can really protect you from those sorts of complaints. Okay, let's move on then to what's still to come. So we're now looking forward. That's the recap for April, and you'll be relieved to hear that once you've tackled all of that, that initial tranche of reforms, there is a bit of breathing space. The government had originally planned to introduce its ban on fire and rehire in October, but that's been pushed back into 2027. However, there are things that you still need to focus on ready for this October, and these are new rules on harassment at work. And there's two connected changes really that are coming in on this. So the first one is third-party harassment. So this is the reintroduction of protection from third-party harassment. It's a really big deal if you're in a public-facing business like hospitality or retail, but it is going to affect all employers to some extent or another. Put very simply, if a customer, client or contractor or supplier or any kind of visitor harasses a member of your staff, you can be held liable for that harassment even though you don't employ the person that's behaving badly. You will, however, have a defence if you can show that you took all reasonable steps to prevent the incident from happening. So there's some action points here. If you're a customer-facing business, you're probably already taking some of the steps as a matter of good practice, but make sure you're covered. These are the 7 actions we'd recommend you take. So number 1 is assess the risks to staff and put in place safety measures. Set clear expectations with third parties of what's acceptable and what isn't. Address the issues in your contractor relationship. Make it clear to them what's acceptable and what isn't. And update your anti-harassment policy and all of your training for all staff and managers in how to handle these situations. Take any allegations really seriously and investigate. Support affected employees and make sure that you avoid penalising the victim. Make sure that you support the victim in all aspects, even if that means that you're deploying them onto different work. Make sure there's no demotion aspect to that change in role. Okay, let's look at all reasonable steps and sexual harassment now, the second bullet there. So the 2nd October change has been much discussed, but will have really little additional practical impact as long as you're compliant with your current obligations. So you already have a duty to take all reasonable steps to prevent forms of harassment. But October 2024, the government introduced an extra requirement known as the Sexual Harassment Preventative Duty. Now, what this provides is that if you don't take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment, a tribunal can increase the claimant's compensation by up to 25%. Now, the Employment Rights Act 2025 has strengthened this further. So you'll have to now take all the reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment to avoid the 25% compensation uplift. So how can you prepare for this change? Well, regulations specify what counts as all the reasonable steps for preventing sexual harassment, and further guidance is expected to be released later on in the year. Hopefully, we hope before October, but there sometimes is quite a habit to send us very late updates. So we'll have to see, and we will of course cover the detail of that in future webinars. But if you want to know what all the reasonable steps are, we do have a handout on that. So again, sign up to the updates from Park City. However, we're not expecting the legislation necessarily to contain special new steps that no one's ever thought of before. So the steps that we've got in the PDF should help. Okay. And if you follow all the reasonable steps, that way you've really got the strongest possible defence to any claim that might arise. So what else is coming in October? A few other October changes. There's a trade union reform that's coming in. This will affect you even if you don't recognise a union. So from October, you'll be required to inform all new employees of their right to join the trade union. And that will be something to include in your employee handbook. and your onboarding process, you'll also have to remind existing staff of this right on a regular basis, is what the legislation says. So trade unions will also have access to your workplace. They'll have the right to come on site for activities like recruiting their new members and representing their members. Okay, the next change is the tribunal time limit. This is the final October change. Though it's not currently in the regulations and the government timeline, it's listed as no earlier than October 2026. So it does suggest that that could slip perhaps into next year. But so you're aware of it, the tribunal time limit, this is the doubling of the time limit for employees to bring an employment tribunal claim from 3 months, the current 3 months, to 6 months. We'll keep you posted on that one. Okay, let's move on now to next year, January 2027. So the next date you need to prepare for is the 1st of January 2027. Now, we realise that sounds like a long way off, okay, but this is when the 3 biggest changes under the Employment Rights Act are coming in. And there are a number of steps that you're going to need to take, but you're going to need to take them urgently now, which is why we're covering it today. So unfair dismissal, first of all, this is the reduction in the qualifying period. So the first change is that the qualifying period for unfair dismissal protection, this is going to drop from the current 2 years of service to just 6 months of service. Now that means that 6 million more workers will be entitled or able to make claims for unfair dismissal, okay? Now, the government has abandoned its earlier proposal for day one unfair dismissal rights and a mandatory probation process, which is the good news. That's the good news. But the current plan is still a dramatic change, and it has an immediate impact on your business now. And here's why, okay? So every employee with at least 6 months service on the 1st of January 27 will gain unfair dismissal protection from that date. That means that you only have 6 months to assess the performance of anyone you hire, for example, from the 1st of July this year, before they gain unfair dismissal rights. So let's look at a couple of example scenarios to kind of bring this to life. Okay, so let's look first of all at Dan. So let's assume Dan started with your business on the 1st of November 2025, last year. So Dan can claim unfair dismissal from the 1st of January as he has over 6 months service. Previously, he would have had to have waited until the 1st of November 2027. Amelia, on the other hand, let's say she starts with your business on the 15th of August this year, 2026. Amelia can then claim unfair dismissal from the 15th of February 2027 when she reaches 6 months service. Now, in managing this, there's going to be a few pitfalls, some common pitfalls to watch out for. Let's say you hired someone on the 1st of April this year with a 6 month probation period. So the probation would end on the 30th of September this year. Now, their manager, let's say, they're kind of a bit unsure about whether the employee's up to the job, and the manager decides to extend the probation period by 3 months, a fairly common current practice. So they extend it to the end of December. Then the manager decides then the employee's really not working out. They decide to dismiss. But the business closes over the Christmas and New Year period, and they don't get round to speaking to the employee until the new year. Well, by the 1st of January, that employee has 9 months service. That means they have unfair dismissal protection. So to then dismiss that employee for poor performance after that point, you'll need to follow your full-blown procedures. It's no end of probation dismissal, simple process. So as a result of this, employers who operate a 6 6-month probationary period or longer could be now exposing themselves to the risk of unfair dismissal if they fail to follow a fair and reasonable process when terminating an employee for failure of the probation period. So before offering employment, the employer should consider the particular period of probation that will apply and any specific terms that might apply during probation. So what are the actions that you can take now for managing probation? Okay, so the examples that we've just gone through, really you need to start taking steps now, ready for the shorter unfair dismissal qualifying period. And here are 5 things that you can do. The first one is review your recruitment process. So think whether more stringent interviews, some tests, further vetting could reduce the risk of hiring an unsuitable candidate in the first place. Definitely take up references and engage a really good quality HR company and business partner to support you. The next step is reduce the length of your probation period. So if you currently have a 6-month probation period, cut it down. 3 months is really good because it gives you scope to extend. You also have a little wiggle room if a manager passes someone only to kind of have second thoughts, or the manager is a bit late in holding that final probationary review meeting. And also a word of caution with that, you also need to consider the notice period here, because if the employee doesn't pass probation and you dismiss, watch that the notice then could then take the employee's service over that 6-month qualifying period, particularly if your probation is longer than 3 months or your notice is longer than a month or so. Statutory notice, as you may know, is 1 week, and you could have dismissed and the notice, you need to have dismissed and the notice taken place, even if you're paying in lieu, within the 6-month period. Also, a word of caution, review anyone that's on fixed-term contracts, as the end of a fixed term is also a dismissal. Third thing that you can do is review your process for assessing new recruits. So you need a reliable system to evaluate their suitability, ensure that managers know how to set measurable targets, they communicate expectations early and clearly, and provide support, training, and regular feedback. And encourage the manager to stick to the timetable for passing or failing an employee. Do ensure that you've got good quality job descriptions for each role and that individuals are assessed against that criteria. Ensuring that every employee knows what's expected of them and how their performance in that probation period is going to be evaluated. Next bullet is tackling underperformance now. So do you have employees in your business that currently have less than 2 years service who will have more than 6 months service by the 1st of January? So if their performance isn't up to scratch, address it this year. It will be a higher financial risk after January the 1st. And the process will need ideally to be completed before December this year, particularly if there's a month's notice, to ensure that the employee has left and completed the notice period before the 1st of January. Okay, so update your documents. Okay, let's go on to updating your documents. Okay, so updating your documents. If you decide to reduce your probation period, update your probation policy, revise your template contracts and offer letters, check you have pay in lieu of notice clause and manager guidance to reflect that. Ensure that you're training your managers at every step of the way, because probation reviews are now so important that the subject almost deserves really a webinar all of its own. But when the government guidance comes out on this, we will review whether or not another webinar on the topic will add value. Okay. So what do you need to do about managing an employee who really isn't performing? Let's have a little look at what are our top tips for managing performance. Okay, so managing underperformance really means balancing the support for the employee with protection for the business. And capability is potentially a fair reason for dismissal under the Employment Rights Act 1996. But where an employee qualifies for unfair dismissal protection, the employer must still show that it acted fair and reasonably and followed a sufficient process. So at present, obviously, as you know, that protection usually starts after 2 years, but as we've covered, this reduces to 6 months from the 1st of January 2027. So here are some practical tips to help managers deal with performance issues early, fairly, and with better evidence. That's really key. Okay, so first of all, set clear expectations from day one. Make sure employees understand what good performance looks like, what standards might apply to their role and their performance and behaviours, and how their success and behaviour is going to be measured. Have clear objectives, good job descriptions, as we've mentioned, a really good induction and onboarding process, and have regular check-ins with people. You know, they can be just informal one-to-ones to make sure that you spot problems early and act on it, and that you gather evidence. So act to resolve the issues. So don't wait and hope that things are going to improve on their own. Let's not bury the head in the sand. Early conversations are often much more constructive, less formal, and easier to resolve before the issue affects customers, colleagues, or the wider team. You need to document it. Document that you met with them and what was said. You need an audit trail. Understand the cause before you escalate. So poor performance is not always a capability issue. Explore whether there are training gaps, unclear instructions, workload, health, personal circumstances, workplace conflict, or even management issues could be contributing before moving to formal action. Follow a fair and structured process. Managers need to know what happens at each stage, what records to keep, and when to involve HR. And a consistent process really will protect the business. You do need to brief and train your managers. One of the risks will be inconsistent implementation of your own policies, and we'll come on to that in a case review. Your managers, you really need to avoid that from happening. It's always good practice to use a PIP. So this is a performance improvement plan. A good PIP should really set out kind of the concerns, the standards that you're requiring, the support that's available, the review period, and the consequences for the employee if an improvement in their performance isn't achieved. Set, of course, smart objectives. Make sure that they're realistic and shared in writing. Get in contact with us if you want support with the PIP process, because it's, you know, certain elements that you need to cover. Make it clear to the employee that this is a positive process and it's designed to support them. It's not something negative that they should be concerned about and seen as a process to remove them from the business. It's a process to improve their performance. Make sure you provide real support and training. If performance is below standard, ask what the employee needs to improve. Ask them. Is it coaching, refresher training, mentoring, clearer priorities? Do they need better tools which might resolve the issue more effectively than moving too quickly into warnings and things? But use staged warnings where improvement doesn't happen. So, you know, if informal support doesn't work, move through a fair warning process with review periods and clear timescales. Do remember the employee's right to be accompanied at formal meetings and their right to appeal. Make sure that the whole process is compliant. Tribunals take the ACAS Code of Practice into account in relevant capability, disciplinary, grievance cases, and compensation in these cases can be adjusted upwards by 25% where there has been an unreasonable failure to follow those codes of practice. A really good HR partner will really help your managers address these issues early and support them to ensure they follow every step of a fair and reasonable process. A good HR support can also help managers to make sure they're following a clear capability process and meeting all of your legal duties. Might be things like setting reasonable adjustments, but also staying compliant to avoid an unfair dismissal risk. A good HR partner will also help your business to set up a GDPR compliant software. Now, this is key because it will enable you to schedule, track and record performance meetings, probation reviews, making record keeping and reminders much, much easier to automate those processes. And this is especially important now, particularly with the law that came in on holiday records having to be kept for 6 years, because employers must show that employees have had their entitlements and how they've been paid. Okay, so let's move on then to look at a couple of cases now and how these impact really. So I've selected a balance of 2 cases, one where the tribunal found in favour of the employer and one where they didn't. Okay, so Johnson is the first one. Johnson James Paget University Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. This was in 2022, this case. The key facts: the employee was dismissed following workplace concerns and ongoing conduct and performance issues. Now, there were multiple internal complaints about the employee, so the employer put restrictions upon them. However, the process leading to dismissal was a bit disjointed and it wasn't quite completed. The tribunal in this case, they focused heavily on what the employer didn't do. They failed to properly investigate issues and grievances. They didn't follow their own internal procedures consistently. There was no meaningful attempt to resolve issues or to support the employee before dismissal. So the outcome at the tribunal found the dismissal was unfair. Despite all the concerns and all the evidence about the employee's conduct and performance. So the failure to follow a fair and structured process was key to the tribunal's decision. Even where the employee contributed significantly to the situation, the tribunal still awarded the employer to pay over £22,000 to the employee because the process that they followed wasn't fair. So the key learning here is most unfair dismissal findings in capability cases aren't about the performance of the employee itself. They're kind of about the process not being followed. If your process is weak, your case is weak. Let's look at the next case. So Kikera, Akaka and Salvation Army Trading Company. This was in 2024. So there were ongoing performance concerns where the employer attempted to address them through a PIP, the Performance Improvement Plan. Now, the tribunal said that the employer did some things really well. It clearly identified areas for the employee to improve their performance. It provided warnings and support for the employee, and it gave a reasonable opportunity for the employee to improve. So even though they're dismissed, the outcome was deemed to be fair because the dismissal was fair, there was no entitlement to compensation. So tribunals really do expect you to take active steps to support improvement of the employee, not just to document where they're failing, okay? It's not enough to show that someone's underperforming. You must also show that you gave them a fair chance to succeed. And it's not just the behaviour alone that determines the cost and award at tribunal, it's whether or not your process stands up to the scrutiny. Okay. Now, okay, let's move on. That's not all, folks. There is more to come. So, Employment Rights Act 2025, what is still to come? So, the removal of the compensation cap. This is another major change to unfair dismissal law, and it's due to take effect on the 1st of January next year. And it's the removal of the cap on compensation. So currently, as you may know, compensation is limited to 52 weeks gross pay or around 118,000, whichever is the lower. And the government is abolishing both of those caps. Now, in practice, most awards are well below that threshold anyway. So at the moment, the kind of median for unfair dismissal is around 6,750. That's only the unfair dismissal element, remember, of the compensation. That's because compensation reflects the person's actual financial loss, and most employees are going to get another job fairly quickly, and most of them aren't high earners. So in most cases, removing the cap won't make that much difference, but for high earners, this changes the picture significantly. People who wouldn't have bothered claiming due to the cap may start doing so, and there could be some eye-watering awards to come. And if you're negotiating an exit package right now with a senior employee, then we'd advise you to push that forward and get that dealt with this year. You know, you really do need to get those things sorted this year. Even if the lower paid employees, some of those might start overestimating what a tribunal award could get them, and then obviously that's going to push up settlement agreements potentially. It'll affect their willingness to agree. So what can you prepare now? Well, if you've got a senior member of staff, as I've mentioned, whose performance is lackluster, let's get on and deal with that now. Now is the time to remove them from the business. Come January, you'll have to follow your full-blown performance management process or dig much deeper into your pockets to persuade them to go quickly and quietly. Right, let's look at what else is coming up that affects dismissals. So first of all, fire and rehire. The other big reform scheduled for January 27 is the ban on fire and rehire. This will make it automatically unfair to dismiss an employee for refusing to accept changes to core contractual terms. You won't be able to force through such changes using fire and rehire. That's dismissing the employee and offering to re-engage them on worse terms. Also, the fire and replace will also be outlawed, which means that dismissing an employee and replacing them with someone else who is prepared to accept the worst terms, that will also be outlawed. So with those reforms looming, it's sensible to consult staff this year on any major changes you're considering to terms and conditions, and bear in mind it is still a tricky process. Do seek advice. The government's code of practice is very key when they're allocating tribunal awards and costs. So important to seek advice with that. Okay, let's recap then on the management actions let's do a recap now. So the window for safe dismissals is rapidly closing, and the margin for error is growing dangerously thin. Every dismissal must now be defensible almost from the outset of employment. So let's run through some reminders. Number one, strengthen your recruitment processes. Strengthen your onboarding and induction. Tighten your probation reviews. Make sure that managers are conducting those properly, setting performance expectations with timescales and documenting them. HR software will really save you time and money here. Reduce your probation periods from 6 months or whatever they currently are, reduce them to 3 months. Review your notice periods. Review contracts. Do you have the contractual right to pay in lieu? Remember to check for any fixed term contracts that you've got in place. They also fall under this. And train managers to manage probation performance and conduct really early. Review dismissal processes and your exit interviews. How can Park City help you with this? Well, if you choose to benefit from our services, all of this is managed for you. That's the good news. And you'll have a long-term business partner. Our team at Park City can write your contracts, all of your handbook policies and processes, can write you a probation policy and support your managers to implement it all and train them. And we're not a DIY service where you have to download templates and redraft it all yourself. We're not a call center where you talk to different people every day. We're your hands-on business partner, and our mission is to help businesses stay prepared, protected, and one step ahead. Our service is face-to-face and on-site, and we're dealing with those dismissals, grievances, disciplinaries and appeals on-site. And honestly, that's really kind of the message today, because with so many employment law changes landing, the businesses that stay safe are the ones with expert HR support behind them, not the ones trying to juggle everything in-house. And that's exactly the partnership that we provide. So let's move on, because there is one really expensive phrase that I want to share with you, and that is, we didn't realise. This is the most expensive phrase in employment law, not necessarily tribunal or compensation. We didn't realise, because enforcement has changed. The safe early dismissal window is closing and compensation is uncapped. So employees' rights also apply earlier. So organisations that act now are going to be in control of their risks and their financial exposure, and the ones that wait will obviously then be forced to react under pressure and scrutiny and cost. So of course, that decision is yours. I really hope that you've enjoyed this morning's webinar. I hope this has added value. We're happy to answer some questions. Sam is here on hand. Sam is one of our lead HR business partners and is absolutely brilliant at all of your employee relations issues and matters. And so Sam is here to support with the Q&A. So we'll come on to that in a minute. On your screen are a couple of QR codes. You can download the left-hand one for a free audit of a policy of yours or a contract, or on the right-hand one, you can book a demo of our HR and health and safety software, a demo with me or one of our team. But let's move on to the Q&A now, over to Kat and to Sam now.
Thanks, Juliet. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat. So the first one is, does the duty to inform staff of their trade union rights apply whatever the size of the business?
Yeah, so that is coming in shortly from October, and regardless of the size of the business, that will apply.
Thanks, Sam. Another one, does the fire and rehire have a time limit before you can hire someone new on the terms that the original employee didn't like?
So from January, well, we expect January for fire and rehire. If you do fire somebody and then try and rehire somebody on those terms, that will automatically be banned going forward. If you wanted to change the terms and the conditions and the employee didn't agree, you wouldn't be able to change them or fire them and then rehire somebody else.
Thank you. And this one's kind of similar. Can you explain the fire and rehire for a new employee on the terms an existing employee didn't agree to, please?
So yeah, at the moment, you have the ability to fire somebody on previous terms that are too costly or the business no longer can afford to do, and then rehire them on less favourable terms. From next year, that's going to be banned completely. This came about after the P&O ferry, where they fired all of their employees and then rehired different ones on different terms and conditions that were less favourable.
Thank you. And a couple more for you, Sam. So we have a new starter in our office, 3 months into their 6th probation period. She started in March. We have had concerns and her line manager has met informally to discuss performance, which included late for work, errors in letters, and disturbing others with gossip. She announced today that she is pregnant. Our internal HR has informed me that we simply can't dismiss her now. Is this correct? If not, how do we use the performance to terminate her probation with no risk?
So although the pregnancy does make things more complicated, as long as you can evidence that you've been supporting her, coaching her, and trying to get to the point of performing how you would like to, and can evidence that the termination wasn't because she was pregnant, but because of her performance, you can still terminate the contract. So depending on how far along she is into her pregnancy, it may raise questions on whether you will have to be expected to pay her maternity pay once she's left, though.
Thanks, Sam. A couple more for you. Our team is expanding. It takes 6 months to establish if a new team member is good enough. In fact, we'd like it longer. So how can we shorten probation from 6 months to 3 months and still reserve the option to terminate if they don't meet our standards after 3 months?
So you'd still be able to extend the probation period after 3 months. They may get up to speed during that time. The key will be to terminate the probation period, including the week's pay in lieu before they reach their 6 months of service. So if you extended their probation by an additional 2 months to 5 months of employment and then assess their performance at that point, it will allow you the opportunity to terminate the probationary period and have the notice paid in lieu without going over the 6 months.
Thank you. And just because we're out of time, I'm just going to quickly, one more for you, Sam. We have several staff with PIPs running, as terminating staff in our sector can create a staff ratio to service users. So we use PIPs to keep the staff whilst we either improve their performance or hire a replacement. Our experience, however, is that individuals react to PIPs in a positive way, but after it's been completed, they quickly turn to their previous poor performance. So we repeat again, how can we reserve this? What makes a good PIP?
So PIP should be seen to be a positive step to help improve performance. If you're finding that following the PIP, the performance goes back, then this would suggest that there's an element of conduct rather than their capability, in that they're choosing not to work to the performing level that they should do, as they've shown that they can achieve the required standard, but choosing not to remain at that standard. So you would then move from the capability process to a disciplinary for conduct rather than capability.
Amazing. Well, that's all the questions for now. If anyone does have any more, please feel free to get in touch and we'll be more than happy to help. So I'll just hand over back to Juliet to see us off.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kat. There's some tricky questions there, Sam. It keeps us on our toes, doesn't it? And of course, these things are never straightforward, are they? So, do get in touch if you've got a particular issue you'd like some support with. Use the right-hand QR code and you can book a Calendly call with us. And use the left-hand QR code for your free audit if you'd like to take that up. Obviously, if you're a client, get in touch. You've got the helpline, as always, which is open to you, and our team of HR business partners, HR advisors, and HR and health and safety administrators are here ready and willing to support you. So, yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for attending today. And we're really glad that you came. As Kat said, you'll get a recording of today's session. It's always useful to go back over some of the content. But thanks very much, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Take care. Have a good day. Bye for now.